You woke up this morning to an alarm, checked your phone before you even sat up, and by the time you left the house, you'd already made about a dozen decisions without thinking twice about any of them. What to eat, what to wear, whether to bring an umbrella. None of it took more than a few seconds. None of it could kill you. Now rewind 50,000 years. Same sunrise, same human body, same brain, but a completely different set of rules. A normal day back then didn't mean an easy day. It meant a day where nothing went wrong, which, it turns out, was never something you could count on. So what did an actual normal day look like for someone living 50,000 years ago? Not a special hunt, not a disaster, just a regular Tuesday. Let's walk through it, hour by hour. It starts before sunrise, because that's when the group is already stirring. Sleep, as we now know, wasn't one long, unbroken block. Someone's usually half awake, tending the fire, and as the sky starts turning gray, more people sit up. There's no discussion about getting up early. Waking with first light was simply how the body worked without artificial light to push the day later. The first job of the morning wasn't breakfast, it was checking the perimeter. A quick look around the camp, footprints in the dirt, any signs that something had come close during the night. This took minutes, not hours, but skipping it wasn't an option. Groups that got sloppy about this didn't last long. Then came the actual first meal, and here's something that might surprise you. It probably wasn't meat. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, the closest living comparison we have found that plant foods, roots, nuts, berries, tubers, made up a significant portion of daily calories, often more than meat did. Meat was valuable, but it wasn't guaranteed. Plants were reliable. So the morning usually started with whatever had been gathered or stored the day before, eaten quickly, standing up or sitting around the fire, no ceremony to it. By mid-morning, the group split up, and this is where the actual workday of prehistory begins. Not everyone did the same job. Research on groups like the Hadza in Tanzania and the Ju hoansi in the Kalahari, both of whom still practice traditional foraging lifestyles, shows a division of labor that's remarkably consistent across cultures. Men more often handled hunting, which required covering long distances and long stretches of patience with no guaranteed payoff. Women more often handled gathering, which was slower, closer to camp, and far more reliable in terms of actual calories brought home. Children weren't idle either. By around age 6 or 7, kids were already learning to identify edible plants, track small animals, and help process food, not through formal lessons, but simply tagging along and copying adults. And here's a number that tends to surprise people. Based on time use studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies, researchers estimate that actual work, meaning hunting, gathering, and food processing combined, took up somewhere around 4 to 6 hours a day. Not 12, not 16, 4 to 6. Anthropologist Marshall Solins famously called this the original affluent society, arguing that in some ways, early humans had more leisure time than people in modern agricultural or industrial societies. That doesn't mean the work was easy. Hunting could mean walking 10 or 15 miles in a single outing with no guaranteed payoff, but it does mean the picture of constant, exhausting labor from dawn to dusk isn't quite accurate. So what filled the rest of the day? A lot of maintenance, honestly. Tools break, cordage frays, hide needs scraping and treating. Someone's always repairing a spear point, resharpening a stone flake, mending a torn piece of clothing. Archaeological sites are packed with evidence of exactly this kind of unglamorous, repetitive work. Piles of stone flaking debris concentrated in specific spots where someone clearly sat for a long stretch, working. This wasn't a special task, it was just Tuesday maintenance, the ancient equivalent of doing laundry or fixing something around the house. Midday brought its own particular danger, and it's one that doesn't get talked about enough: heat. In hot climates, the middle of the day was often too intense for serious physical activity. Modern hunter-gatherer groups in hot environments tend to rest during peak heat hours, moving activity to the cooler morning and evening. Humans are excellent at shedding heat, remember, with around 2 million sweat glands, but even the best cooling system in the animal kingdom has limits. So a chunk of the normal day was simply downtime forced by the sun itself. Sitting in shade, resting, maybe doing some of that low-effort tool maintenance, waiting for the worst of the heat to pass. This downtime mattered for another reason, too. It's very likely when a huge amount of casual conversation happened. Gossip in the literal sense. Who did what, who's related to who owes who food from last week. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar has argued that this kind of low-stakes social chatter functioned as a kind of social glue, the same role that grooming plays for other primates, except humans could do it while sitting still, resting, and covering way more social ground per hour. A normal day wasn't just about calories, it was about maintaining the relationships that made survival possible in the first place, and that maintenance happened constantly, in small doses all day long. By late afternoon, people started drifting back toward camp. This is where the day's separate efforts came together. Whatever was hunted, whatever was gathered, got pooled and shared. And sharing wasn't optional generosity, it was policy. Studies of hunter-gatherer food-sharing norms consistently find that successful hunters were expected to distribute meat across the entire group, not just their immediate family. This wasn't purely selfish, it was insurance. The hunter who succeeds today might fail for the next 2 weeks, and when he does, he needs the group to share back. Refusing to share wasn't just rude. In some documented cultures, it could get you socially frozen out entirely, which, in a small group with no backup plan, was close to a death sentence.
As the sun got lower, food got prepared and cooked, and this is where fire did its second major job of the day, after keeping predators at bay overnight. Cooking wasn't just about taste, it made food easier to digest and unlocked significantly more calories from the same amount of food, particularly meat and starchy plants. Some researchers, notably primatologist Richard Wrangham, have argued that cooked food may have been one of the key factors that allowed human brains to grow as large as they did, since a bigger brain needs a huge, reliable calorie supply, and raw food alone struggles to provide that efficiently. Evening was in a lot of ways the actual heart of the day. Once food was eaten and the immediate tasks were done, people gathered around the fire. And this is where the tone of the day shifted completely. Remember that daytime conversation tends to be practical, resources, complaints, logistics, but multiple ethnographic studies of groups like the Ju hoansi found that nighttime fireside conversation shifted dramatically, with a large majority of it turning to stories, songs, and shared cultural knowledge. This wasn't idle chatter. This was how skills, warnings, and history got passed down without writing. Where the water dries up in the dry season, which plant looks edible but isn't, what happened 3 winters ago when the hunt failed, and how the group survived it anyway. And this is also very likely when a lot of the deliberate teaching happened. Not formal lessons, but demonstration, story, and correction delivered casually around the fire, where kids were half listening while playing, and adults were relaxed enough to actually explain things properly instead of barking quick instructions during an actual hunt. Then, as it got fully dark, the group settled in for the night. And we already know how that part worked. Someone stayed half alert, the fire got tended, sleep came in stretches, not one solid block, ready to interrupt at the first wrong sound. So add it up. A normal day 50,000 years ago wasn't 12 hours of grueling survival work. It was 4 to 6 hours of actual food-related labor, a significant chunk of forced rest during the heat, ongoing tool maintenance scattered throughout, ordinary social time that mattered more than it looked like it did, and an evening built almost entirely around fire, food, and story. The danger wasn't constant either. It was more like background pressure, always possible, rarely happening on any single ordinary day, but never fully absent either. That's the part that's easy to miss. Normal didn't mean safe. It meant nothing catastrophic happened today, which is a very different bar than the one you're used to clearing. You'll go through today doing things that would have been unthinkable luxuries 50,000 years ago. Food you didn't have to track down, water that doesn't require walking to a specific spot and hoping it hasn't dried up, a door that locks. And somewhere in the background of your very ordinary day, you'll probably feel bored at some point. That feeling barely existed for them. Their normal day was full, not with stress every hour, but with just enough real stakes that boredom never really had the room to show up. You inherited the rest, the calm, the safety, the leftover hours with nothing urgent to do from people whose version of a completely uneventful Tuesday still required watching the tree line, sharing what you caught, and making sure the fire didn't go out before morning.